up and grab this. Thank you very much to Cypress for hosting the event and for inviting Partners as their partner and kind of favorite pharmacy benefit manager. What we're going to talk about today is a little bit about our history, our background, PartnersRx, and I'll give you a little bit of information, and then I'm really going to turn over the bulk of the presentation to Matt Mertel, our Chief Information Officer, as you heard, who will go through a couple of different presentations on giving you additional data to make informed decisions. So first, a little bit about our background. Very unique from a PBM standpoint. There's not too many PBMs that have a background similar to ours. And the reason why I say that is because we're 30 years in the mid-market industry with 30 years experience. And so that dates back to me personally, again, being with the company since 1989, the Diversified Healthcare Company. We've had several different companies. We've had started out with a benefit consultant company in Arizona. One of our largest clients at the time was Smitty's grocery store, and they had asked us, to process their claims. So we started a third-party administration company. From there, we then had a UR large case management company that we took to a national UREC accreditation. From there, we went into the MGU business as a managing general underwriter. And one of the times I went out on maternity leave and came back, I was then underwriting. And so I have both a background in sales and underwriting, which is a little bit unique and different, but it was good. And so as we evolved and went into the MGU business, we actually sold the TPA, because then there was a conflict as you're working with other TPAs to own an MGU. But we drove our MGU business up to $100 million in fully insured premium and $60 million in self-funded premium. And so our background is pretty wide in scope as far as the overall healthcare industry and not just the PBM side of it. And so we like to express that because when we're bringing solutions to the table, we're looking at the bigger picture and not just the PBM. So definitely wanted to share that with you as far as some of the background. As far as when we started PartnersRx 10 years ago. It is now our core company, our core PBM as far as, that's where all of our resources lie today. We don't have the MGU anymore. That's now been sold. But it just gives you a feel for our entrepreneurial spirit. And when we had the MGU, we were in a position where we were looking at, our claims on the RX side and seeing those costs increase and trying to find out solutions for those and what we could do, to help ourselves in that MGU role when we were had some of those dollars at risk. So what we did was, that's when Mark said, we're going to go ahead and do this a little bit differently. We're going to start a PBM. And with doing that, we're going to do it differently than anybody else. And so again, 10 years it's just now been our 10-year anniversary. And when we started, a couple of our main components was to, one, be in a complete open book business model. And so with that, we share all of our revenue streams. We share all the rebate information. You have complete access to our clinical team, to our executive team. And so that's just how we operate on a day-to-day basis, and we continue to do that today. And so there's a lot of PBMs that today are using more and more transparency. You're seeing that maybe more in the last 3 to 4 years. Well, we've been doing it for 10 years, and it's just a complete open book philosophy is the words that we choose to use. From a PBM landscape, we wanted to give you kind of an overall glance of the overall healthcare benefits. As you all know, they're increasing. Medical up 3.9%. The RX is up 1.2%. Sorry, I'm moving around too much. And then the average insured family is up 7.3%. But if you look in the center under the RX benefit, one of the things that we want to share with you is that the RX benefit is being competed away. The price is being competed away. And what we mean by that, you look at a couple of different things here, and you've got the generic utilization is going up for a lot of plans. That's positive. A lot of drugs are coming off patent. You have new drugs are actually down, not as many new drugs. A lot of specialty drugs up, but not some of the other therapeutic classes. Your rebates are both up and down. And then specialty is a bit of unknown, although we know that's coming with a high price tag. So when I say that, the price has been competed away, when we're out there contracting with the pharmacies, and you think about PartnersRx and whether it's Medco or Restat or any of the other PBMs, we're all going out to the same pharmacy chains, to your Walgreens and to your Express Scripts, to the CVS pharmacies and the Walgreens, and we're all trying to get the same contracts. And the stores are basically giving us those same discounts at the end of the day because they want that foot traffic in the pharmacies, to buy the other items on the store. So we're all getting the same, 17.3 AWP brand discounts, and we're all starting at the same point. So for us, we're saying price has been competed away. We need to look at other factors on making your decisions with regard to pharmacy versus just that alone. You need to find other reasons to make it compelling for you. As far as some of the items that you're seeing here, this is just for us everything that you would expect that a PBM should have. So we've got the 64,000 pharmacies. We include all the chains with that. We've got the Walgreens network. I know that's been a big, question with a couple of different vendors. Smart tools, you've got all your member and support tools online. Award-winning mail service. We have 2 mail service providers, Overland Park, Kansas, and Carlsbad, California, and they do multiple workload balance between the 2. And then the formulary, the clinical formulary, and the customized benefit plans. A little bit on that as well. The other major component when we started the PBM was how we were going to set up our formulary to be different than our competitors. And this has been a big aspect of, how are you going to set up your formulary and what are you going to do? And so we look at the various drug options and we say we're going to put the higher cost drugs in a tier 3. Well, first we look at the drugs that are most clinically effective for a member from a medical standpoint, and those drugs will automatically be on tier 2, those brand name drugs. But after that, we look at the cost of the drug. And for instance, a Nexium, which is a high dollar expensive drug, for us in our formulary, we'll put that in tier 3 because it's going to, at the end of the day, save the client more money if we're able to, put a lesser expensive alternative in that same category in the tier 2. And so we look at all the 100 therapeutic categories, and that's the approach that we take. And by doing that, we're saving on average about $6 on a per claim basis, or just under 7% in your drug spend. And so there is flexibilities around that as far as moving formularies if you're concerned about some disruption and so forth. But as a starting point, that's a lot of our advantages for using our formulary and having those savings. The guaranteed savings, we also have a replay analysis tool that we can analyze some data, look at that, and then put a guarantee to it. You've got your physician and member outreach, and then some specialty care coordination. But what does all this mean to you? You've got cost management options, knowledge to make informed decisions, and we need to be adaptable to your needs. And so at the end of the day, we're looking at, on a group-by-group basis, how can we adapt to your needs, Lisa, and to your needs, John, and just really determining what is a fit for your group at the end of the day. And so some of the cost management options that we see is actually, if you look at the graph, the cost savings are on the left, and then on the bottom you've got your behavior change. And so it's basically, at the end of the day, where do you want to be? You can do all of these items in the smart tools that you're seeing on the right, whether it's implementing our Tier 0 program, which is a $0 copay program for a couple of classes of drugs that are going to save your plan money at the end of the day, because you've got members taking lesser expensive drugs than again, a Nexium as an example. You can do our formulary and our rebates. But sometimes in the analysis, what we end up with is the CFO is looking at the cost savings of a 10.5% savings. But then you've got the HR director in the room at the bottom going, okay, what does that mean for me at the end of the day from a behavior change standpoint? How many phone calls am I going to get? How many members are going to be saying, hey, my drug's in a different tier right now? And so by the time we actually implement a group, we might only be at a 4% savings because we've met in the middle as far as what their needs were. And so it's really where you want to be at the end of the day, the management programs that we can employ. And it ties very well into what Cypress and what Tom was saying on the medical side. We're just going to give you all the tools and the cost management options to employ to have the savings that you're willing and wanting to generate for your membership. This is actually a case study of one of groups that we've had with Cypress since 2008. And so we've been the pharmacy benefit manager. They're located in Wisconsin. You can see there you've got about 771 members. The savings over a 4-year period and 3 months was $486,000. And that basis was coming from a formulary, that had the higher cost formulary than PartnersRx is with our approach. And so it was implementing our full formulary without any changes or edits, and then taking on our full clinical edit programs and doing our physician and member communication programs. And so I'll give you a little bit more detail around that. Looking at the group in a snapshot, and this is some of the reporting that you would see from us on some of these groups. We started in 2008 at 827 members. You've dipped down in 2011 now to 771 members. The fourth column down, the utilization rate, has stayed pretty consistent started out at 8.34 and now is at 8.58%. And utilization on our book of business, it's about 9 scripts per member per year. And so this is right in that area to give you an idea what that utilization number is. And then ingredient cost paid on a per day basis, the second number from the bottom, started out at $2.63 and now is at $2.54 in 2011. And what that means is that's the number to treat your drug spend. It's what does it cost to treat your plan on a per day basis. And so if you take all the drugs and you take out all the day supply between mail order or the 90-day scripts at mail or some of the 60-day scripts, and you bring it all down to what does it cost to treat my group on a per day basis, that's what ingredient cost per day is, and that's one of the numbers that we look at very routinely. And so you can see when that's trending down, I mean, that's the key statistic that you're going to want to look at. And then the generic dispense rate, on the other hand, that's gone up, and anytime you can increase your generic dispense rate 1%, you're saving overall plan 1.5%. And so you can see that's gone from 63% in 2008 up to 77% in 2011. And then what we actually did when we were doing the analysis for this particular group and for this particular client is we indicated what the day supply is, again, our ingredient cost per day, and then we're showing what it was prior to PartnersRx. And so we knew based on the claims, the data that we reviewed from all of 2007, they were spending $287, put a 4% conservative trend on that year after year, and then you see our actual performance numbers, and that's how we came up with the $486,000 in savings. Again, our formulary, our clinical edits, but these are some of the things that can be done. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be turning the presentation over to Matt Mertel, who's going to get into a lot more detail on giving you knowledge to make informed decisions with a couple of different presentations. But before I do that, I just want to introduce a couple of folks from our office that are here as well. Kristen is our primary account manager for Cypress. And then we've got Kylie Ward here, who's our senior vice president. And Chris Derrick is our vice president of business development. A lot of folks know Chris from in the room. He started the relationship with Cypress 5-6 years ago, and I've been lucky enough to take it over in the last 10 months myself. But anyway, we'll all be here through Friday for any questions. If we can help answer, that'd be great. And then I will pass it over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. How's everyone doing? Okay, so Cheri talked about the positioning that we have up on the board, the cost management options. I saw a little bit of nodding. It's important to note that in the PBM industry, the low-hanging fruit has been competed away. It's gone. You're not going to easily switch from one PBM to another and just save gobs of money. It's not there anymore. You see it with the Express Scripts Walgreens feud. Walgreens basically said, we have nothing left to give you. We're not selling enough Gatorades on the margin to make up the difference that we've given you on your discounts. And so we can't do it, and we'll just exit your network. We're fine with that. And so what has to happen is you have to get behavior change in the members to start saving any real money. And what we've started to note is, as a PBM, we have an optimal point. We think we have a spot where you should be. But that's not always right given the decisions that you have to make with your groups. It's a very personal decision. Maybe they did really well one year and they want to spend more money on their benefits. Maybe it's been a tough year and they want to save some. That's a decision that you guys need to make. And to make that, we have to help you and give you the knowledge to make the informed decisions. And so what I'm going to show with you is 2 fairly short modules that we've created. The first one is turning information to knowledge. And that talks about how to take PBM data, drug data, and extrapolate it to the health and the conditions of the rest of your group. And the second piece is about repricings. How many in here have used repricings to select PBMs? Come on. Come on, a lot. There's got to be a lot. And it's a de facto standard. And I'm going to go through some of the games and manipulation of that data just to give you some information on how to look at them a little bit more critically than maybe in the past. So the two modules, turning data into knowledge and the misrepresentation. The first one, turning data into knowledge. Albert Einstein said, information is not knowledge. Right? It's a great quote. If you think about today, we have more information available to us than any time in the past. And talking about this very subject, Professor Neil Ferguson at London School of Economics said in the last 200 years, the human's brain's ability to process information is relatively unchanged. You think we have a little bit more information today than we had 200 years ago, right? And so we are faced, he used the word tsunami, with a tsunami of information every day that physically we just cannot process. And it is making thinking harder. So we think we're smarter with our smartphones. I think that's just a creative marketing name. And in a sense, it may actually make us dumber. So when I heard that quote, I said, well, how much knowledge are we hit, or how much information are we hit with every day? Some of us are heard about megabytes, right? Gigabytes, some of us terabytes. In 2010, society produced a zettabyte of data. In 2011, 1.8 zettabytes. And I said, great, that number means nothing to me, right? So I put it into comparison. Does anyone recognize this number on the board? What is it? That's correct. That number is 15 trillion. A zettabyte is 1 with 21 zeros. So by comparison, that's a zettabyte. Zettabyte, yeah. Somewhere below a Google byte, but there's a Google byte out there, but it's a zettabyte. What's the next progression? I'd be lying if I answered. I'd just be making it up. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's 2010, 1 zettabyte, 2011, 1.8, and it's growing exponentially. Okay, so now I said, great, I got two large numbers that mean nothing to me. To get a zettabyte of data, you would have to print out the 2,000-page healthcare reform bill 707 trillion with the T time. 707 trillion times. So if we all started now, went home and started printing, we would never finish and we'd all be dead, right? And be totally broke from all the toner. Right? Yeah. So I did some more research. That is enough paper, if we could ever finish it, to fill all of Las Vegas, all of Nevada, the rest of the United States, 3 feet deep in paper. 1 zettabyte. 3 feet deep. And you say, okay, all that's not healthcare data. I'd say, you're right. 30% of it is. So all of us in this room are responsible for not for 3 feet, but a foot of data. That's a lot of something. I don't know what to do with it. And so it's our obligation, whether we be healthcare companies or other companies, to take all this information that we have that we've never had before and turn it into something valuable, some knowledge. And it's interesting. A really simple model has told us, well, yeah, we knew we were going to be here. And the stage 1 of a data maturity model, and the yellow indicates value, is limited data. And for all of us, it was cell phones that did 2 things. Made a call and took a call, right? And that was it. Maybe an occasional email. But along came the internet, and we left stage 1 and we came stage 2, and that's big data. Society's stuck here. It's not moving. It turns out that the brain freezes that, wow, we are worse decision makers today than we were 10 years ago with all the information at our disposal, which is crazy. Time magazine last month produced an article, a study. So let's say 24 hours in a day, we can all agree on that. We sleep somewhere about 8 hours. We have 16 hours left. Can anyone guess, out of those 16 hours, how many of it we spend consuming data? Pretty close. It's like 13 and a half hours. And what's funny is the human brain is binary. It's kind of good at doing 2 things. It's either good at consuming information, and it's good at processing information, but it's really bad at doing both at the same time. And I think we all know this intuitively. We're working on a problem at work or something. We're totally stumped. We lost our keys, lost our wallet, can't figure out how to help the client, can't solve the math problem, whatever it may be. When do you fix it? When do you figure it out? Next morning when you're getting ready, you're in the shower. Shower for me because I can't take any of my devices in there, right? So, or on the way to work or whatever it may be, all of a sudden it comes to you. And that's because you've stopped consuming data long enough to allow your brain to actually process it. It's kind of intriguing if you think about it. So I guess next time if you're at work and you're totally stumped, you can tell your supervisor, I got to leave so I can figure this out, right? So stage 3, some companies are, and I can't believe I'm using a bank as an example of this, but if you compare and contrast banking, who balances a checkbook anymore? No. Really? Let me know when you find that rounding error of a couple zeros in there somewhere. So very few people, I was going to say nobody, but very few people, yeah, it will. Very few people balance a checkbook anymore. And that's because banks have gotten to the point where they're in stage 3. They give you the right data at the right time. It's not very exciting, but it's there when you need it. But really where we all need to get is stage 4, and that's predictive data. And there are definite examples of that. And in Amazon, what happens when you order something from Amazon? The doorbell rings, they drop the package off, and on your smartphone, which is making us dumb, I guess, you get an email and says, I hope you like your new product, right? And then it says, if you like this product, you may also like these 3 products. And, wow, okay. Or LinkedIn or Facebook finds colleagues you never knew you had, or friends that you don't remember meeting in the locker forever ago. MasterCard, credit card companies, how do they know when I'm buying the big screen TV at Best Buy, it's not fraudulent, but when the guy's buying the Thirst Buster at the gas station, there's an error on the charge? How do they do that? And that's because they've modeled data and starting to become predictive. And as healthcare companies, as a PBM, we have to be in stage 3. We have to make the right data available at the right time, and we have to get predictive. And so I was going to preface my presentation today to say I'm going to show you some reports, and I just had pictures of everyone just quickly exiting like a fire drill. So I'm going to set it up. And what I'm going to show you today is the inspiration that we took from these types of companies to deliver that value from the data. Okay, so what's interesting about moving into stage 4 is you try to answer the simplest of questions, and those sometimes can be the most complicated ones to answer. So using drug data, what is the medical condition of my group? Seems reasonable, right? We should all know what's going on generally with the group based on the drug data. The inspiration for this for us was iTunes. A lot of iPhone users in the house. So anyone who uses an Apple product probably recognizes iTunes. iTunes is great for what it does. It takes all your media and syncs it to your device. You know what it's really bad at? Answering the question of what type of music you listen to. To me, if it's an MP3 player, it's what you listen to, all your music and media on. It should be able to tell you, oh, you like this type of music, but you look at this and it cannot. And so we took data from an iTunes and we charted it. We charted the number of songs and the number of albums, and we figured that would be a really good way to figure out what type of music people listen to. And so as this draws in, we said, okay, if you own a lot of albums and you have a lot of songs, that's what you like. And so we have the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. We're like, oh, okay. But then we realized, who here owns songs that they don't like? Right? Everybody. Where did that music even come from? But it's there, and you've kept it with you all these years. And so we said, what if we take another look at this, but change it and actually rebuild the chart, but showing how often we listen to the particular music? And now the chart looks very different. And so our attention isn't drawn in the upper right anymore, but it's that green dot in the middle. Like, oh, you too? Okay, but what is going on with that blue dot down there? Who could that be? Oh, Justin. Was that the exit for the door, or were you dancing? So I guess what does Justin Bieber have to do with the medical condition? Not a lot, but it's a good way to show you how we got here. All right, so what we did is we took drug data. That's typical PBM reporting, right? You get a list of drugs. Now, what does that mean to me? I have plenty of people in our office who can look at that and get some knowledge out of that, but to me that's just data. It means nothing. And so what we did is we took all the drugs in particular experience and then mapped them to ICD-10 codes. And the interesting thing about drugs is they're not one for one. A lot of drugs cross multiple conditions, and so we had to come up with an algorithm to prioritize and bucket these things and weight them appropriately. We go back to our chart, but instead of albums and songs, now it's claims and utilizers. Utilizers are people that have actually taken the drug. It's a member that's taken the drug. And so as this is drawn in, again, our attention is drawn in the upper right. General symptoms, what is that? Hypertension, allergies. And so we said, you know, this is okay, but what if we redrew this, but with the relative spend within each category? And as this builds out, now you get a very different picture. And so our attention isn't drawn in the upper right anymore, but it's maybe that maroon dot, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, and disorders of lipid metabolism, so cholesterol. So basically now, taking a top 25 drug list, you can see what's going on with your group. You see where the relative spend is, and what's neat about this is I heard them mention earlier about disease management wellness programs. Well, we've seen since we've produced this report that companies are implementing wellness programs that don't all align with what's going on with the medical condition of the group. So a report like this helps you quantify where you should be focusing your effort, because it does two things. It shows you how big your population is spending in one category, because you don't want to put a lot of effort if you only have 1 or 2 utilizers. You're not going to be able to manage that. And it has to be a relatively large spend so you can impact it. And so once we had this, we said, hey, wouldn't this be cool if we took a snapshot before and after, say, a diabetes management program? Because then we could quantify the worth of what we're doing. And so this is before, and this is going to draw in here. Very dramatic, isn't it? So we took a look at this. In the disease states we're focusing on is diabetes, lipoid, and hypertension, because those are 3 that kind of always walk in tandem. And this group came to us and knew they had a diabetes problem, not because the drug spend was relatively low, which you can tell by the size, but because they had so many medical claims related to it. People were not taking their pills and going to the hospital. It's what we all want to avoid. So we implemented a diabetes management program, and what we wanted to do is on this type of report say, what did it look like before and after? And so we blank out all the other disease states, and then we take a look at what it looked like after. And so these arrows indicate the movement. So after a program went into place, the diabetes utilization relative spend increased about 60%. And then in tandem, the lipoid went up. So the number of utilizers went up 17%. The claims actually went down 8%, which is interesting. And what we hope happened, and it's going to require more research for us to find out, is that people got a little bit healthier in the category so that they take fewer and fewer medications, is what you would hope. And then hypertension went up in conjunction, 31 and 16%. So now, what's neat about this type is you could say, was that worthwhile? And you can throw it down, you can juxtapose the two of them and say, yeah, this is what happened before and after the program. And as a little plug for us, this type of reporting is available to any group that's with us. It's just part of our standard package. Okay, next question. What should our narcotics usage look like in a group? Does anyone get this question? It's like answering the question, what is normal? Am I normal? I don't know. Good luck answering that question, right? Yeah. And so the inspiration for this one was credit card companies. And I kind of alluded to this before, but did you know for every credit card you have in your wallet, the credit card company has constructed what I call a shield. And on that shield is different axes, and it's basically the number of purchases that you spend within a given period on your credit card, where you use your credit card. Do you use it at your home zip code? Do you use it at your work zip code? Do you travel a lot? Types of purchases you use. Are you buying TVs? Are you buying pots and pans? Is it dry cleaning and gas? Whatever it may be. And then the number of purchases. And so what happens is, the types of items purchased. And what happens is, anytime you behave outside of that shield is when you start getting calls. So let's walk through the scenario. Like, let's pretend I leave from Phoenix to go to a wedding in Atlanta. Now, the trick for this example is if I bought my plane ticket on the credit card I'm talking about, they will adjust your location score. They know you're going to Atlanta, which is kind of creepy if you think about it. It's going to make us all want to start paying cash. Or if you go to Atlanta and use your credit card behind security, a newsstand, Starbucks, anything behind, oh, he or she got to Atlanta safely, we're going to adjust the location score. Kind of scary. So I land in Atlanta and I leave the airport and I go to Crate and Barrel, or I buy my Starbucks. And it says, what is he doing in Atlanta? So it pings the location score. I'm like, wow, that's kind of odd. What is he doing? Let's just start to watch it. Then I go to Crate and Barrel and I buy pots and pans. And at that point in time, they know that's totally out of character for me and say, what is Matt Mertel doing in Atlanta buying pots and pans? So at this point, they probably put a hold on your credit card, and we've all been there. Your next purchase, they say, can I see your ID? And so the credit card company at that point in time is trying to validate that you are who you say you are, and you're actually checking, and then they can adjust your location score. So at the end of the weekend, I've spent a lot more than I normally do, and I've just had a really great time, and my credit card's completely shut off. We've all been there, okay? So we said, hey, that's kind of interesting. I meant we've all had our credit card shut off, not had too much fun, right? So we said, can we use this to monitor narcotics? And so what should the narcotics usage look like in my group? And we said, hey, let's use the credit card model. And this is the baseline, but instead of types and amounts, it's narcotics. How many narcotics per member being purchased? Narcotics plus, which are muscle relaxers and other narcotic substitutes, if you will. Multiple prescribers and multiple pharmacies. So they're shopping the medication. Because very few members realize that there's back-end data aggregators. They think what happens at Walgreens, no one knows that they may have done something similar at Walmart, for example. And so let's just go through. Member A violates the narcotics score. Member B may look to be shopping. Member C, narcotics, narcotics plus. And member D has blown the whole lot. And the trick with this, like the credit card example in Atlanta, I was legitimately in Atlanta. I legitimately used my credit card. It wasn't someone who took it. All of these may be legitimate uses. They may have had a car accident, workplace, whatever it may be, but we needed some way to capture what looks aberrant in behavior. And so we constructed this. We were really proud of ourselves, and we put it on a report, and it looked like this, and we said, oh, shoot. We're going to need to give someone a jeweler's loop to figure out what's going on. You know, if you had a 500-life group, you'd have to look through each one and figure out who violated the shield. And so we went back to big data when we were trying to move to predictive data. And so we redrew the report, and this is what it looks like. I'm not going to go through each axis here, but it's the same as the shield. You got narcotics, narcotics plus, prescribers, and ultimately members of interest. What's neat about this report is the little green arrow above each line indicates what a group of size we're looking at would have to be normal. That's what our expectation would be. On the first line, the red shading and the gold arrow and the red shading indicates that what's actually happened is above what we would expect. If it were below the expectation, it would have been blue. But it doesn't mean if you have 1 or 100, you still have one member of interest at the bottom that you have to look at. And so what we decided to do is say, hey, are our narcotics programs doing what they're supposed to do? And so this is a before. A group came to us and said, we have a narcotics problem, we'd like you to manage it, and so we did it. And this is what happened as this builds out. And it shows the shift in how they went. The kind of shadowy one is where they were before. The green arrow indicates the direction it went down. The red arrow indicates it went up. And what we discovered is in our narcotics management program, as we found people that we thought were using narcotics incorrectly, that as some of them stopped, some of them actually changed their behavior. And so if you imagine that we have a balloon, and as we take our hands and push down on the members that are taking narcotics and push down on the prescribers that are prescribing those narcotics, we can only push so much on the balloon. Some of those members change, some of the prescribers change. But what we discovered happened, which is kind of interesting, you can see certain categories actually went up. So as we push down on the balloon, the non-narcotic controlled substances started popping up, as did multiple pharmacies. So what we think happened is people said, oh, well, I'm not going to totally stop. I'll just switch. And that popped up the balloon. The other thing is I'm going to get a little bit more crafty and start going to different pharmacies, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. But the next one is my favorite. A group came to us and said, I know we have a narcotics problem. A very young population, large group, work really hard together, play hard together. They were convinced that they had a narcotics problem. And we said, well, let's model it. Let us take a look at this. And what we did is we expected this. And this is what came back. And as these build out, every single category was 6 and 7 standard deviations below the expectation, which just basically means it should not happen. And so we went back to the plan sponsor and said, you don't want to spend the money doing this because you have no narcotics problem to manage. And we said, do you drug test? They came back and said, no, we don't drug test. And so we went on our way researching some more and came back and said, come on, you have to drug test. And they said, no, we don't drug test, we just tell everyone we do. And at that point we kind of said, aha, if our clinical team was standing right here, we ran to the other side of the room because now we had some suggestion that potentially workplace drug testing or the threat of drug testing may be more impactful for managing narcotics abuse than anything we can ever create. And if you think about that, that makes sense. What's more dangerous to somebody? A letter in the mail or their paycheck? And so just another way to use data. All right, how does my specialty spend compare? Perfect timing, by the way. That's all right. And so this one's a little bit more whimsical than some of the other ones have been. And so word clouds. Word clouds, for those who are not familiar, are a tool where you can take any copy, emails, contracts, whatever it may be, and paste them into a tool. And it goes through and counts all the words that are in there, and it will render an image where the word used most frequently will be the largest, and the second largest, so forth and so on. And so to kind of get warmed up to this idea, I have two up on the board. Can anyone guess what the one is on the left? What's that? Women's Magazine's close. It's on the right side of the fence, the correct side of the fence. Okay, so number one is not Women's Magazine, but it's the most commonly used words in advertisements for girls between the ages of 3 and 10. So that leads you to believe that the one on the right is the power, battle, I think stealth, and special forces, most commonly used advertising words for boys ages 3 to 10. All right, so let's, now that we're getting this. Anyone guess what this one is? Yep, it's exactly. I kind of screwed. First off, it took me forever to get the whole thing in the tool, all 2,000 pages of it. The second thing is I screwed up, and I could have told the tool to keep Secretary of Health together. It would have been more obvious, Secretary will, Secretary will, Secretary will. Okay, so each year, the other guys create their drug trend reports, and it's my job to read their stuff. And sometimes, like all of us, I don't enjoy reading their stuff. So this year, they're 104 pages, 132, 36 pages. I don't know what CVS did this past year, maybe going green, who knows. But instead of reading them, I dropped them all in a word cloud. I wanted to figure out what they were saying. And so my first blush, it came the, and, of, and. I was like, this is silly, right? That doesn't do me any good. So I removed the most commonly used English words. And I got drug trend. Well, it's a drug trend report. That doesn't help me, so let's remove that. And what I'm left with is specialty. And what was intriguing about this, and although it was a bit, we actually did this, it was a bit whimsical. It was interesting because specialty spend, in a roundabout way, I'm going to get to your question. Specialty spend needs to be looked at on a relative basis. If you look at those drugs in isolation, 2, 3, and 4 grand, it becomes very overwhelming. And sometimes it makes a lot of sense to look at them on a relative basis of the total spend for drugs of the group. And so to answer this question, how does my specialty spend compare? Top 25 list, I've highlighted the specialty medications in yellow here. There again, more data, no knowledge. And so we wanted to take a look at this on a relative basis. Let me explain this chart. The peer average for groups of the size that I considered it's like 13.5% at the end of the 12-month period. Group A spent nearly 31% of their total spend on specialty medications. That's a big number. That's a really big number. But by comparison, Group B spent 9.8%. And so that's a much smaller number, obviously. And so what we wanted to do is to figure out if we could find out anything in the demographics or the benefit design of these particular groups that could explain that with some predictability. And so what we did is we came up with this chart. And give me a second to explain it. Across the bottom, the ratio there of specialty medications to non-specialty medications shows you what percentage the member pays of specialty medications versus non-specialty medications. So a 1 would indicate on a percentage basis that the member pays the same percentage for specialty medications as non-specialty medications. Anything above that means they pay more for specialty medications than non on a percentage basis. Up the y-axis there, a 40% indicates that of the total drug spend, 40% is on specialty versus the rest. So it's a big number. So let me show you, there's Group A, over 30%. There's Group B, okay? And so what we did is first we split it. We split it at where the member pays on a percentage basis, the same percentage for specialty as non-specialty. And what I found intriguing is that 92% of this random sample, the benefit design is set up in such a way that the member pays less 92% of the time for specialty medications versus non-specialty medications. And that kind of makes sense because an overwhelming majority of the benefits that are out there are what I call dollar copays or nominal copays. $5, $20, $40 for the drugs, right? And most drugs process at the third tier. So the $40 copay that was designed, the benefit was designed 10 years ago or however long ago when drugs were under $100. Now when the specialty hits it at $2,000 on a percentage basis, the member is not paying anywhere close to the original intentions of that benefit design. Okay? So I was surprised to find that out. And then what I did is with every one of the 92%, it's kind of a crapshoot whether you spend above or below the average. The horizontal line is the average spend. So 50% of the group spent above and 50% group spent below. It doesn't really help me much. But what I found really interesting, of those groups that had a percent share of specialty where the member pays at or more for specialty medications they do for non-specialty medications, they were all below average in terms of their specialty spend. And what's tricky about this chart is like I said earlier, is that specialty is a hard class to quantify because they're very rare conditions, sometimes end-of-life conditions, and it's hard to put something that's so economic on something like this. And I get that. But anecdotally, we have plenty of stories where doesn't need to be a percent copay. It could be a percent copay up to a dollar amount. It could be prior auth. It could be something. But if specialty spend goes untethered, we have anecdotes like we found a member in one of Cheri's groups that was taking a specialty medication for the side effect. Not for the intended consequence of the drug, the side effect of the drug. It turns out she found a prescriber to give her this drug because she was cold in the office, and one of the side effects was a warming sensation in the body. And so what the group could have done for 1 month worth of cost is, 40 or 50 space heaters or maybe even a dedicated unit on the roof, but that's because it went through at the third tier copay of $40 with no prior auth or anything else. And of course it was 6 months later before any of that was caught. So, is everyone okay? Should we go play some more Bieber or should we move on? No more Bieber. So back just to the data maturity and just to hammer home that it's really important, for my business that we operate in stage 3 and stage 4. And I think for everyone else's business out there, knowledge is going to rule the world. And we have so much data available to us, we got to make good use of it. So, okay. All right. Now we're moving on to the misrepresentations of repricings. All right, here we go. So I think this graphic kind of gives away my feelings about the repricing exercise. And so since I think we have a pretty good mix of audience here, the first thing we have to answer is what is a reprice? And basically, whether you're a broker or a group, and you're looking at some historical data set. That data set of claims has some total at the end of a period, last 12 months, whatever it may be. And they adjudicated at some contract term, 15, 16, 17, whatever it may be. A repricing basically takes those same claims and re-adjudicates them under new terms. And so you have total X, now you have total Y. And the difference in those should quantify the value of switching a PBM. That's the intention. So in the days gone by, PBMs bought at legitimately different rates. Okay, so some PBM may have bought it at 10 or at 12, and another one could have been at a 15, and off you go. And so material difference in contract rates at the end of a repricing exercise would have shown material deltas, material differences. Okay, but what's happened is PBMs, Cheri alluded to it, have basically been competed out, and everyone buys and sells at the same rate now. And so just to put this into perspective, if you have $100,000 of drug spend currently, can anyone guess what moving from a 16 AWP to a 17 AWP would total at the end of on 100,000 of drug spend? Can anyone guess? Very close, $800. And if you think about how hard we fight to move someone from 16 to 17 or 15, whatever, it's 100 basis points, 15 to 16, 16 to 17, on $100,000 of drug spend, it's $800. And just real quickly to walk you through the math. So out of 100,000, about 80% is brand spend, right? So that's 80,000 of the 100,000. a 1% shift in discount is only going to give you 1% of that 80,000 or $800. And it just, for me, it puts a lot of what we do in perspective. And so when we run repricings, like contract terms should have like results. So what we came in the door with should be exactly what's produced. But what's actually happening is the difference is material. And you get repricings that vary by 30 and 40%. They're just wildly different. And what's happening is you're sending it to the marketing department of PBMs. It's not the actuarial side, it's the marketing side. It's a sales tool. And the tool falls on a spectrum of gamemanship. And there's 5 major levers that they pull. And the first one, and I'll go into more detail, AWP price surfing. And that is where the PBM will look back in time and find the most advantageous price for them to pick for the repricing. So brand drugs, if you were to draw a chart, typically move from the lower left to the upper right. They increase over time. Generic drugs typically move from the upper left to the lower right. And so they decrease over time. And so PBMs have been known when they do repricings, pick the oldest brand price and the newest generic price. The next one is discount padding. That's where the PBM takes credit for discounts on drugs that they didn't achieve. This happens a lot with usual and customary or submitted price. A pharmacy could be running a special and they're letting Lipitor go at 30% off, whatever it may be. Network swap is where if a PBM finds a maintenance med on your history, they will move it to mail. They'll move it to a restricted network. They'll move it to 90 days at retail, even though it's only a 30-day script. And basically what they're doing is picking up additional discounts. Mandatory generics. Lipitor will be a good one for this. This is where they're going to switch Lipitor now to, help me out with the name of the new, not simvastatin, that's a therapeutic switch. The A, it starts with an A. Torostat, the drug formerly known as Lipitor. And then therapeutic switch is where they basically are free for all. All right, so let's go through. I apologize. I know it's after lunch, some good chicken wings and sliders, but we got to go do a little bit of math. I apologize. So total paid on prescription claims is like every other claim out there. There's a member paid piece and there's a plan paid piece. But where really the rubber hits the road is total paid also equals ingredient cost paid, or ICP, plus dispense fee plus tax. Dispense fee is what's paid to the pharmacy to actually issue the drug. Tax, believe it or not, every parish in Louisiana has tax and a few counties in Illinois. But for the sake of today, we're going to ignore that. We're going to focus solely on ingredient cost paid. Ingredient cost paid, as this builds out here, equals the average wholesale price times 1 minus your discount. This is the same math we all do when we're shopping at Bed Bath & Beyond and say, oh, 20% off of $20 is what? Same math, it's just written out in form. Average wholesale price in our industry is our manufacturer suggested retail price. And did you guys all know that every PBM starts out at exactly the same price for a given drug? So it's exactly the same. We all start, if it's $100, we all start at $100. We all apply the discount. It's all the same. It's published by one or two sources, either Metaspan or First Data Bank. Okay, so price surfing focuses on the AWPs. All right, here we go, another data list. What is the, sorry with all the acronyms, average wholesale price of this NDC, National Drug Code? National Drug Code is our model number. Not a serial number, it's not unique to each drug, it's the model number. And so the first thing we have to do is, what is the AWP of this NDC? And I'm going to chart it. That's it. That's it for PartnersRx. That's the same one for Express Scripts, for Medco, for everybody. That's the chart. And so what we do is we pick the date the claim adjudicated, apply our discount, and that's the price it should sell at, $169.40. So far, the math is pretty straightforward. All right? And if we did it for every month in the year, you tell me a month, I could tell you the price of that drug, what the price of that drug should be. So that begs the question, how do you get 30 and 40% results when it's this easy? And what PBMs start to do is they start to play games. And it's not uncommon that when we get data sets in, for those of you who send them to us to do analysis, we always validate the data first. And on this particular data set I'm going to give you, we went through and we expected to see, in green here, this would be the discounted price of the ICP. But in reality, it came in like that. And it's kind of, this is a bit flat. I mean, it's perfectly flat. And what that tells us they did is they didn't use the chart above, but they used the average price over the period. And we said, hey, that's kind of neat. I mean, it may be a violation of the contract, but it's kind of fun. So what, giving you a little insight into my life, I guess. So you say, what would happen if we didn't use the actual price on that month, but the average over the given period through a repricing exercise? And so what this chart does is it shows that. And so the yellow line is the average ICP. And you could see at the beginning of the period that we're looking at, the actual line is below. So we'd be at a disadvantage, right? We'd be better off using the true price. But at the end, we're at an advantage. And so on the day we looked at, there's nearly a 5% advantage by using average AWP. So an analyst sitting in a PBM somewhere can all of a sudden save 5% on this transaction by using the average price instead of using the actual price. And the problem with a number like 5% is if you spread that over 10,000 claims and you just pepper it in every time you see that NDC, which, oh, by the way, was Lipitor, you pepper it in, all of a sudden you've got a material difference at the end of this repricing and you don't know what you're looking at. And unless you went through each line item and validated every calculation, you would never catch it. And so to continue this game, we said, let's not use the average, but let's use the minimum. And all of a sudden, we're on to something here. Because at the beginning of the period, you can see we're a wash. We're break even. We don't get hurt at all. But the whole remainder of the period, we're at an advantage. And on the date in question, we're at a 10.2% advantage. Now, that's a material saving, just by using the wrong reference price. So signs of price surfing. So if you get repricings back, all right, and you submit it to a PBM, and these are big numbers, $2.8 million in drug spend of AWP. What that means is that's the retail price. That's the basket of drugs that adjudicated. That's what they should retail before you apply the discount should be. So whoever does the repricing, it should be 2.8, 2.8, 2.8. It should be exactly the same. It's your starting point. All right? But what happens is they come back and the full price is like 2.1, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. And the second sign of it is they don't have 15,500 claims, but they start dropping off. And so those are two signs. If you take the repricing grids that all PBMs are famous for generating, including us, and total up the scripts and total up the full AWP, you can quickly see that this happens. And of course, they removed, the 200 cheapest scripts, right? No, of course not. 200 most expensive scripts. All right, so back to the equation. Now we're going to look at the other side. Now we're going to look at discount padding. And this is where a PBM takes credit for discounts that they didn't do anything to achieve. So this time we're going to hold the blue line constant. The red diamond indicates where the drug should price at. But you may be surprised to find out they adjudicate at points all around that point. And so sometimes we pay 10, sometimes we pay 20. And what happens if we chart this in a histogram? The red bar indicates the contracted rate. And nearly 70% of the scripts will adjudicate at the contracted rate. But about 10% will adjudicate at a discount less than the contracted rate. That happens when a pharmacy has a geographic lock. They're typically an independent pharmacy. And they say, sure, I'll be in your network, but I'm not going to sell it to you at 17. You need to pay me 15 or something less just because they have some competitive advantage. The other thing that happens is from usual and customary, which is UNC, and submitted, is nearly 20% of the claims went at a price much greater than the contracted rate. We've all seen it. I call it the comorbidity special of the week. You walk into Walgreens, if you buy a Gatorade, get your blood pressure checked, and you buy your Lipitor script, they'll sell it to you at a $50 off, whatever that may be. And all of our plans are set up to where that benefit is pushed on to the member and the plan. But in our data set, we have 20% of the scripts for that drug that adjudicated a discount much greater than our contracted rate. The net result of this is if this was sold at a 15.5, I could defend a position to where on average that script doesn't adjudicate at 15.5, but something more like 16.7 and pass that along on a repricing result. And what happens is you pick up this whole advantage at the bottom here. So you get 8.3. And what's intriguing about AWP price surfing in discount padding is that's nearly 20, they're additive. They don't cancel each other out. So by doing this, I've all of a sudden sold Lipitor at 20% off below what it should price at. And that's a very highly utilized drug that's going to mislead you in your results. All right, network swap. This is where the pharmacies or the PBMs take a maintenance medication and switch the route of adjudication. So someone walks in with a Lipitor 30-day supply and they say, whatever pharmacy. And they say, oh, that's a maintenance medication. I'm actually going to fill you at 90 days at retail. Even though it's a 30-day script that would require the member to go back and get a new prescription, I'm going to fill it at the greater discount at the 90-day at retail network and pick up the 3.5 points. And then they say, oh, let's not stop there. Let's feed it through our mail order facility and pick up 10 points on the spray. Never anywhere do you see it footnoted that the member to achieve these savings has to go back to the prescriber and pick up a new script. And then my other favorite, which is gaining a lot of popularity, is the limited network benefit. You guys see that at all out there? Where PBM will say, which is a legitimate savings tool. Don't get me wrong. It's a legitimate savings tool, but it doesn't have a place in a repricing. What they say is if you use targets only, we'll give you a more competitive network discount. That works great, except you have to take into account the disruption of all those members who don't get stuff filled at Target or whatever the limited network is. And in a repricing exercise, they just go through and say, oh, there you go, more discount. And the way you find this, the answer's up here. You see it? It's under retail. It's that fine print. And they use a catchy phrase like a balance of prescriptions were processed on XYZ PBM's preferred network. And there's two great words in there. Preferred, whatever that means. And then balance. Balance could mean one script or 100. It does, and so that's how you detect it on repricing exercise. Mandatory generic program. Again, a legitimate savings tool, but what a lot of PBMs are doing on repricings is they take the total spend and multiply it by historic savings percentage. In this particular example, the group had $3.4 million in drug spend. They multiplied it times 15% and said, our mandatory generics program will save you $500,000. Well, if you look at the data, the group only spent $120,000 on multi-source brands. What a multi-source brand is a brand drug that has a generic equivalent. Lipitor is now in that category. Before it wasn't there. So right off the bat, they have $380,000 of impossible. You can't save $500,000 when you only spent $120,000, right? The next thing is, even if you got the people to switch, they still have to pay for the generic drugs, right? And so they didn't take into account that there was $70,000 of generic spend. So they had $430,000 of overestimate. So in reality, the savings is the difference between the $120,000 and the $70,000. So they had $50,000 of savings opportunity. And so we all know $50,000 is a lot less than $500,000. A little bit. Yeah. All right. So therapeutic switch. I hope the symbolism's not lost on anyone here. And this is where Lipitor goes into the box at $169.40. And out the back comes simvastatin at, I think, $8.42. Happens all the time. And this is a tool where every time they would see a Lipitor script, they would automatically switch it to simvastatin. And simvastatin is an interesting drug. For about 75% of the people, it does work just like Lipitor. But who am I in a repricing exercise to assume that I could, what was previously sold at $169, switch it to $8.42, or a 98% saving? And so you're like, you don't know what you're going to get there. Okay, so the possibilities. What I've shown you is one drug on one day. The price should be $169.40. And if I do discount padding and AWP price surfing, I get all of these prices. I could kind of show in the data. And if I add the other 3 games, I get that many prices for one drug on one day. And so when you send a repricing out, you got to know it's going to the sales and marketing department. No offense, Cheri. And it's not the actuarial team. And so when you get one back, like the marquee, you're lost in the mall, you kind of got to figure out where you are. And if you see 20, 30, 40, 50% savings, if you see those kind of discounts, you got to understand that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And so just look at it with a little bit of eye of skepticism. Thank you.